Hello and welcome to the show. This is Robert Ferguson. You're a nutritionist, a guy who cares, and that's why I share. Today, I am going to blow someone's mind when it comes to this thing called the glycemic index. You hear about it all the time, especially when it's about weight loss, or I'll hear nutritionists and dietitians. They'll say, well, it's high in the glycemic or it's low in the glycemic. And for the longest time, it was all about the glycemic index. And then it was all about the glycemic load, which made way more sense. I mean, I even wrote about it in all my papers in the late 1990s and in my very first book, the beginning of the 2000s, called Fat That Doesn't Come Back. We highlighted the glycemic index and we talked about the glycemic load. But I've always said it's not the be all end all. But unfortunately, as time has gone on, a lot of your bigger companies, because people have become fascinated with sugar, they want to avoid it at all costs. If it's high in the glycemic index, that's a problem. Stay away from those things. Go low carb, so then stick with low glycemic foods. Here's the deal, you guys. There are some positives with the glycemic index and the glycemic load, but it is not the be all end all. So I'm going to share with you a study that recently took place that is mind blowing. Now, before I go into this study and we go into the details of it and I blow your mind, especially for those of you who are always talking about the glycemic index, I strongly recommend that you stick around. If it takes me 10 minutes, 12 minutes to go over this for your own knowledge, you want to know this, right? Because I see a lot of people that are in the health space, they're advocating better health, and they'll think that they already know what I'm about to talk about, but they don't know. Uh, so for those of you who believe you know, and I see a lot of you guys doing posts, take a moment, stay humble with me, and let me educate you a little bit. Now, if you're new to what I'm doing, if you're on the YouTube channel, if you're not on the YouTube channel, go there eventually and click on subscribe and hit the bell so that whenever I share information like this, you will be notified. All right, let's get into this thing. Okay, there was a study done very recently where they literally went in and they wanted to do a study on ultra processed foods. Um, and before they went into the details of it, they had a hypothesis. And the hypothesis was based on their objective of taking ultra processed foods because they're a big part of what people are consuming around the world. Then looking at the glycemic index and the glycemic load. Now, for those of you who are new to the glycemic index, it was created in 1981. And what they did is they took all the different types of foods that are out there that are carb based and they compared how fast when you ate 50 grams of that food and that food breaks down and gets into your blood, how fast it becomes sugar in your blood. And they compared it to pure sugar. So if pure sugar was given a number 100, and let's say you ate a white potato, it's given a number 95, that's when white potatoes were demonized because they're high in the glycemic index. And same with other foods. So then people started to avoid a lot of foods that are high in the glycemic index. Well, what this study wanted to demonstrate, which I don't know why they did this, I wish they had called me, was they wanted to demonstrate that ultra processed foods, right, foods that are highly processed, like chips and let's say kettle corn, or things that are highly processed, far from nature, will be higher on the glycemic index, and that would be another reason why we want to avoid it. Plus, there's this ongoing association with the fact that if it's high on the glycemic index, it's part of why we're gaining weight, which I totally do not agree with 100%. And there is 1000% no data that supports that. So their hypothesis was that the glycemic index and the glycemic load would be lower when you ate foods that were less processed, right? So if I ate a banana, well, banana is one ingredient, it's less processed, it's not processed. Or if I grab an apple, then they're saying that the glycemic load and index with those foods will be lower compared to something that was manufactured, that is more highly processed, has way more ingredients added to it, etc. So they went in thinking that, okay? And the outcome was that the foods that were more processed came in lower on the glycemic index and the glycemic load. Now, I already knew this, but they didn't. So I'm going to give you an example of something that we share with our clients when we work with them on how the glycemic index works. Now, as you can see here in this picture, if you look to the left, down bottom left, you can see there's pure sugar. So based on the glycemic index, as I mentioned, pure sugar is given the number 100. Now, this is all based on 50 grams of carbs in a single food. Nothing's added to it. It is what it is. Now, the baked potato, which is natural, right? You can dig it right up out of the ground. It's a natural food. It hasn't been processed at all. Well, it measures at the number 95 on average. I've seen 85 to 95. So a lot of diabetics are avoiding foods like this, which I wouldn't avoid it. Why avoid it? Well, once I finish what I'm about to share, then you'll know why there's no need to avoid it. Well, if you look at the ultra processed food in the chips, and we're only looking at 50 grams of carbs of the chips, is lower on the glycemic index and the glycemic load, and it's highly processed compared to a baked potato. So this is what, they spent some millions of dollars discovering this, which we've been talking about this for years. Well, the reason why the potato chips, even though they're highly processed, and they used to be a potato, the reason why they measure or are better on our blood sugar is because they have oil or fat woven inside of the chip. And it's the fat that does play a role in slowing down how fast that chip will break down and become sugar in the blood. So if you were my client, I wouldn't tell you not to eat a baked potato. I would encourage you to add oil or a fat to it like butter. And because you're adding butter to that potato, the butter is going to help slow down how fast the potato becomes sugar in the blood. And at the same time, remember, the glycemic index was based on a single food, not how you eat food, right? Because if I had a steak with that potato, the protein and fat in the steak is going to slow down how fast the potato becomes sugar in the blood. And the broccoli that goes with that, or the asparagus, or the black beans, or whatever other what we call slow carb I consume with it, the fiber in there is going to help slow down how fast that potato becomes sugar in the blood. And the antioxidants that comes with that vegetable that I'm eating is also going to contribute toward my not experiencing high levels or higher levels of blood sugar. So all of this being said, I already knew this. They now know this, but let me share a couple other things with you. So you have full clarity and you can go into the weekend knowing something either better or learning something for the first time. Now, here's the life of a banana. When the glycemic index looked at a banana, they gave it the number 70 based on the glycemic index. Now, I don't know if they were talking about the banana is at number 1 or the banana at number 7 or the bananas in the middle. And this is one of the big reasons why the glycemic index has never been fully adopted as a science. I mean, there's some good ideas there. It gives people a little bit of information, but it can definitely send you down the wrong path or have you misled thinking that you understand something that you really don't understand because it's not scientific. It just isn't. Now, when I look at that banana to the far left, I see a banana that's really high in starch. And when I look at the banana all the way to the right, number 7, it has less starch because it's now much more sugar. Now, at the end of the day, starch and sugar, eventually when in the blood, are sugar. But with the starch, it has what they call a resistant starch to it, which acts kind of like a dietary fiber, which if you ate the green banana, you will get less of a glucose spike compared to if you ate the banana with all the spots on it. Now, all bananas bring with it something positive. I wouldn't avoid any of them, and I would embrace and enjoy them. Just learn how to eat foods the way we teach, at least, or make it a snack and keep it simple. Okay, but again, depending on the life point of the close to nature plant-based food, dictates what the glycemic impact would be. So that's why I'm not the hugest fan. One last thing, and I would say is probably the most important thing, is when you look at the insulin response. So, in one of my seminars that I made available online called the Carb Threshold Report, I show this. And if you look on the left, you see where there's an apple and you see the apple juice. And the GI next to that stands for glycemic index. Well, based on 50 grams of carbs, whether it's an apple, which is not processed at all, or whether it's the apple juice, which is highly processed, the glycemic index is basically the same, 38, 41, and this is considered low. Well, if you look at the image on the right, that's more of the insulin response. So the apple you can see is still low, but the apple juice is spiked really high. So you're going to always get more of an insulin response when something is highly processed compared to if something's close to being in its natural state. So the integrity of the apple does really help us. And what all that means is that it's always best to eat the apple than to drink the apple. It's always best to eat the carrots than to drink the carrots. The more a food goes from its natural state, even though it may not show any change with your glucose, your sugar, which unfortunately everybody's so focused on, behind the scenes is causing elevated levels of insulin. And when you have elevated levels of insulin, which eventually can be called hyperinsulinemia, that stimulates migraines, high blood pressure. Your balance can be off. It can drive you to have cravings that you don't want as far as foods. It can cause you to become insulin resistant. Um, and all behind the scenes, those processed foods are causing that to happen. And so when insulin's elevated, another thing to keep in mind if you're wanting to lose body fat, you cannot release fat when insulin levels are elevated. You cannot. You do not. Okay? Doesn't happen. So when insulin levels are down, that's when the body is way more efficient at releasing fat. So without going into great detail on all of that, um, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was beneficial. I hope you got a couple things out of it. Again, I'm not totally putting down the glycemic index. If you notice, I don't even talk about it that way. You know, if I talk about foods, I don't say, oh yeah, you know, you don't want to eat too much of that. It's high in the glycemic index. I don't say that because the glycemic response is nothing when you understand the importance of the insulin response. So there you have it. You know, the study demonstrated that we already know this. I mean, I've been talking about this for years. And that's not an ego thing. I'm just saying, you know, those who are supporters of mine and have been following the work that we've been doing, we've been preaching this forever. And so they're slowly starting to catch up. But it's going to be a while because the only way they could really catch up is if they knew everything about the Diet for Life methodology. We got something, we got gold here, you guys. We got gold. And some of you people who are putting it off and not embracing it, I want to invite you, like, you know, check out our website, join our newsletter, get involved. You will be ahead of the game when it comes to being able to eat regular, everyday foods in the healthiest way. And the science is already there. We are evidence based, clinically proven. We don't have to prove anything else. We've done it. And we have years behind us in doing this. And now it's just a matter of people discovering it. You know, and in closing, I'm working with a bunch of oncologists right now, and I'm coaching them all. And it's amazing because for 4 or 5 years, I've been in contact. And for the last year and a half, we've been working really hard in being able to provide a solid nutrition plan for people who experience cancer. And for those who don't want to experience cancer, or definitely they don't want to experience recurrence of cancer. However, they still want to live. They still want to enjoy life. And to me, food is a big part of the celebration of life. And I've literally heard adults tell me, they go, Robert, I can't even imagine living life and saying I have a fun, quality life and I can't eat certain things. And I don't need to eat them all the time, but I want to eat them. And I totally get it. And so that's where we come in, because there is a way to make that happen. You can still eat the foods you love. You don't have to go from one extreme to the next. It's not about totally avoiding carbs to get the outcomes that mean better weight loss, better energy, everything. It doesn't have to be the opposite of that way. There's a way to create balance for this to work for everybody. You know, someone goes out and let's say they're a comedian and they're entertaining all the time. And when they go out and entertain, they want to have a glass of wine, or they want to indulge a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are ways to do it, really small tweaks to it that can make all the difference. It's just a matter of knowing. Knowledge really is the divider between being able to live your best life, your healthiest life, but yet enjoy food as part of the celebration of life. I'm Robert Ferguson. You want to learn more? Reach out to us at dietfreelife.com. Other than that, be blessed.